Hi, I'm Rita. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, Life Worth Reading. And welcome to another episode of Pick a Card and Get a Book recommendation. As you might already know, or maybe you don't, I have been using tarot cards for a really long time. I feel like I bought my first deck maybe in 2018, 2019, so it has been a while. But I've never been the most consistent with using it. I like having my fun. I did for like almost 3 years, the Tarot Picks My TBR every single month, and those are really fun times. And because I have been connecting a lot more with my cards lately and I have been really feeling them, I thought I could do another episode of Pick a Card and Get a Book recommendation. There are a lot of like pick a card videos on YouTube and get certain meanings out of it, and I thought I could do that to give you a specific book recommendation for whichever card you choose. So I have picked the cards. I shuffled the deck and I picked out 5 cards that I put face down, so you can look, pause the video, see which one you feel like you're drawn to from 1 to 5, and then I will give you specific book recommendations on whichever card you get. I've tried my best to do like a mix of genres, a mix of authors, so I feel like there'll be at least a recommendation for everyone, but I hope that you do enjoy. And without further ado, let's go to the card section of the video. So for all of you that have picked out card number 1, this is the Princess of Wands. Usually this is the Page of Wands in other decks, but in the Mystic Mondays deck by Grace Duong, all the pages have been substituted by these beautiful princesses. And the Princess of Wands is very much about usually the beginning of something. It's about someone who's very enthusiastic, who has a lot of fresh ideas, who is in a phase of discovery, and who wants to mostly try new things, have different perspective on things, and someone who is so excited to start things. There is a lot of restlessness in this person. There's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of ideas, and just an excitement to get started on a project, to do something that hasn't been done before. And so I think that this Princess of Wands is someone who is very inspirational, someone who has a lot of joy for life, and someone who is very determined and looking forward to implementing something new. My first recommendation for this card is actually an autobiography, and that is To Be Young, Gifted and Black by Lorraine Hansberry. I first read this book. That was the only time that I read this book. When I was in university, this was in my university library. I picked it out because it sounded really interesting. I had never heard of Lorraine Hansberry, sorry. Now I know that she was a Broadway and theater writer, and just a writer in general, a great writer at that. She wrote the amazing play A Raisin in the Sun that has been on Broadway for a long time. And so this is an autobiography told through different mediums. We have letters, we have journal entries, and it really is about someone who is, there's some sadness, there's some confusion in there, but I do really think of Lorraine Hansberry as a Princess of Wands, someone who wants to implement something new, who has different perspectives on things, and who is so excited to just create. And I feel like this is a very underrated autobiography. I feel like I really connected with this author, with this story, and I really admired her and I cannot wait to have a physical copy for myself. I will be purchasing it for sure. And I just really see her as someone who has this restlessness to create. And I think that that is very adequate for the Princess of Wands. Then I also have another nonfiction, and that is Girl, 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 a memoir or a nonfiction on Black Girl Magic by Kenya Hunt. I listened to this audiobook quite a few years ago. It was maybe 2020, 2021, and I really enjoyed listening to this audiobook. It is a nonfiction about Black Girl Magic, about girls, about womanhood, and it just really inspired me as well. It just feels just very new and fresh and has such potential in it, because the Princess of Wands is, all princesses and pages are cards for potential, and I feel like this audiobook just made me feel really great inside. And though I don't remember a lot of the content, I remember just feeling great listening to it, and I feel like you would too if you read it. So give it a listen, give it a try, and see what you think of it. And the final one might be a little bit controversial, but I'll try to explain myself. I have My Brilliant Fan by Elena Ferrante. Basically, the way that I see this is both of these girls, Elena and Lila, they were born in a very poor city, Naples, in the 60s. And both of them are, for me, the definition of potential, even though they are so different. It just feels like there's so much potential in both of them to create and to do something different, and they end up doing that. And it just really reminded me of being young, of wanting to discover, of wanting to do better, of wanting to know more. It just really reminded me of that potential, of that phase of discovery, of the phase of restlessness and being young. And I feel like though they are a bit limited later on due to their circumstances, I feel like they both represent potential in very different ways. And again, this is one of my all-time favorite books. It's so amazing. If you for some reason haven't read it, I feel like you really should give it a try, and maybe you would understand what I say when I mean that they are both, in very different ways, Princess of Wands. The next card that we have is the Two of Pentacles, and the Two of Pentacles is all about trying to balance multiple things at once, trying to adapt to your circumstances as best as you can. It's about management, mostly like time management, task management. It's about trying to do your best when things just feel a little bit out of balance, out of control, and trying your best to adapt to every situation that you are in. For this card, the first book that I picked was actually fantasy, and that is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. Listen, even if you're not a high fantasy girly, you need to get on this. You need to get on this, because I didn't think I was like a really high or like adult fantasy kind of person. It turns out that I am just a Robin Hobb stan. I read this trilogy this year and I am obsessed with the Farseer trilogy, obsessed with the characters, obsessed with everything. And I feel like the Two of Pentacles really applies to our main character Fitz, who is this bastard's, no, he is the bastard. He is the son of one of the princesses, so he is a bastard because of that. And he is brought to this kingdom when he's very young, when he's 6 years old, and he is kept around the court, and he's learning to be an apprentice, like an assassin. So he's the assassin's apprentice, and because of this he needs to leave this very careful double life where people feel like he's there in court because he is the son of this prince, because he is a bastard, and he needs to be kept around, and no one actually knows that he's being used for all types of tasks, for all types of secretive things going on behind the scenes. So he has to lead this double life that I feel like has a lot to do with the Two of Pentacles. There's so much going on in his life. Everything just feels completely out of control most of the time, and he needs to work so hard to adapt to his circumstances. And it's just the beginning of such a beautiful journey, such a beautiful fantasy journey. I cannot wait to continue on with the series. The first one isn't really that big. It's like normal size, so please give it a try if you feel like you might enjoy it, because I feel like it's so worthwhile. Like the journey in this trilogy, chef's kiss. Next up, again in the double life spectrum, we have Colson Whitehead's Harlem Shuffle, and this is about our main character Ray Carney, who is kind of dodgy, kind of not. He is on the outskirts of dodgy, okay? So he has this furniture store, but his cousin Freddie often brings him stuff that could be from many places and he does not question it. So he doesn't really do the bad things himself, but he's like surrounded by dodgy stuff. And then there's this heist that happens. It's not a big part of the story. Please do not go into this thinking that the heist is a big part of the story. I was kind of bamboozled by it, but it's still a worthwhile story to read. And Ray Carney just puts himself in a position where he also has to leave this kind of double life and hang around these really dangerous people whilst also trying to live a normal life at home and protect his own family and his own interests. It's a really great like character exploration. The atmosphere is amazing in this book. Like the Harlem atmosphere of the 60s is really like it's just so reminiscent. It's so amazing. And even though it wasn't like my favorite thing in the world, I think it's worth a read. And it really reminded me of having to balance things that do not seem like they'll balance well. And finally, for this card, we have Rest and Be Thankful by Emma Glass. This is a really short novella that is very heartbreaking. The ratings on this are not the best, so I'm recommending this. I really enjoyed it, but it's not for everyone. And this is about an NHS healthcare worker in the UK who works in the pediatric unit. So she is taking care of sick babies, but behind the scenes her life is falling apart. Her fiance has left her. She is in shambles. She's not sleeping well, and in the daytime she has this really tough and emotionally exhausting job that is being a pediatric nurse. It's very heartbreaking. It's very confusing at times. It's very sad, but I really enjoyed the writing. Obviously I love the cover as well, but that is because it's Ophelia. And I just feel like it's one of those where it's so sad to see her have to do her job when her life is falling apart, having to maintain her focus and herself around such a heavy environment, having to manage other people's emotions, having to manage your own emotions. There's just also a lot of like balancing act that is being done here. And I feel like it was just such a great look into what this life is, because the author herself is a pediatric nurse in the national healthcare system in the UK. So it just felt really raw and very real about what it is like to have this job and having to balance everything that comes with it. Next up, we have the High Priestess. And the High Priestess is one of my favorite cards. It's all about the divine feminine. It's all about your higher power, your intuition. Usually this card shows up when the veil between you and the other world is very thin, when you can really sharpen your intuition and feel certain things. And it really is about just how powerful you really are on the inside and how you can help yourself to bring that to the outside world. The first recommendation that I have for this card is This Sentence by Louise Erdreich. This was a book that really took me by surprise. I bought this kind of on a whim in 2023, and I bought this book because it's set in a small indie bookstore in Minneapolis, where actually this author also works. Not the same one, but this author also works in a small like indie bookstore, and it's about her life, I guess, there, but it follows a Native American main character who has been to prison. She did something kind of bad, but at the same time she was brought in for a different crime that she wasn't really aware of. It'll make sense when you read it. It's right in the first like 20 pages, so it'll make sense when you read it. And when she goes out of prison, in the meanwhile, while she's in there, her old English teacher usually used to send her like books in for her to maintain her love of reading, her love of writing. And when she gets out, she gets a job at that small indie bookstore owned by that old teacher of hers. And so she has been working there for a couple of years, and she's such an interesting character. I really identified with some of the things that she said. The writing in here was really beautiful as well. And basically in this book, one of their most annoying customer dies in the store, in the bookstore, on All Souls Day. And this character believes that she is being haunted by this entity. So again, the High Priestess is about spirituality, it's about ghosts, but it really is about how powerful this woman is. How powerful, I think her name is Tuki. right? Tuki, yeah. How powerful Tuki really is, and just her inner strength and just the way that she is and her intuition and her connection to all these beliefs, just really intriguing. And I feel like it really shows that she is a high priestess, even though she might not look like a regular high priestess, but she definitely she is. And I feel like, I don't know, this book just took me by surprise. It wasn't what I expected to get out of it, but it was so much more than what I expected. And I feel like whenever a book surprises you like that, it just stays in your mind, and this really has. Then we have a horror book, and that is Woodworm by Lila Martinez. This book, the reason why this applies to the high priestess, there's a lot of power also within this house. It's a more horrifying power. It's a more kind of sometimes religious power related to like saints and stuff. And it really is about like the divine feminine, but in more of like a female rage kind of way. So it really is about how the women of this family have been wronged for so many generations, and how this house was built on just hate and that kind of like unfairness against all of these women, and they are now taking fate into their own hands. We have our main character, who is a young woman, and we have her grandma, and they are taking things into their own hands now, and they are taking that power back. I thought I would enjoy this more than I did. I don't know if it was a translation, but I thought I would enjoy, I thought I would enjoy this a little bit more than I did, but I still think it's a good horror book, and I feel like it definitely applies to the high priestess, because they tap into their inner power and they are making some shit happen. Like, I'll tell you that much. It's worth a read for sure. It's a very different kind of horror book, and I feel like most people do enjoy it when they read it, but I was just expecting a little bit more. And my final recommendation is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, specifically the first book, The Fifth Season. I feel like this book is also the definition of being a high priestess in a world where that is not really appreciated, right? So we have 3 perspectives in this whole book, and it's about a world where there is a 5th season that just kind of like fucks shit up every couple of cycles, and there's a lot of like earthquake, earth power. It's called the Broken Earth trilogy, so it really is about that, like the catastrophicness of earthquakes and earth itself. And most of these main characters, I don't remember the name of a single one of them. I really need to reread this book. It has been like almost 3 years since I've read them. I'm a little bit fuzzy on the details, and I definitely need to reread it and own it physically. But it really is about also tapping into that higher power, and this time is like actual powers, right? And actual manifestations of power, to also try to change your course, try to change maybe what fate has tried to give you. And I don't know, I just specifically the main perspective that we open up, where this woman comes home to find that her son is dead. Her older daughter, who has the same powers as her, is missing, and there's just so much grief that comes with that, and there's a lot that comes with that, and it's really her just tapping into her self and her powers and her strength, and just getting up and changing things. And I just remember that feeling of reading that, more than obviously the fantasy is amazing, the story is amazing, the like magic system, the world building, everything is absolutely amazing, and K. Jemisin just knocked it out of the park. The twists themselves are great, but like that feeling just really spoke to me. And when I pulled the High Priestess and thought about books that reminded me of that energy, The Fifth Season for sure. If for some reason you still haven't read it, I think that you should definitely give it a try. It's a little bit hard to get into sometimes, but it is definitely worth the read. Then if you picked card number 4, we have the Emperor, and the Emperor is all about control, authority, structure, power, but a different kind of power, a more masculine power, a more direct power, a more overbearing power sometimes. And it really is about that relationship with others. And because of that, for this book, for this card, I chose a completely different style of books. And the one that I picked first was actually An Unkindness of Ghosts by River Solomon. I've read this book recently. This is a sci-fi novel set in outer space. There's this giant ship called Matilda, and it is basically organized socially as the antebellum South. So the higher decks have the most power and the most great living conditions, and then the lower decks that you go, the lower in society people are, more often than not, obviously Black people, because of the comparison to the antebellum South. So that is just how the society is organized, and we are following a character who is trying to rebel against this system, who is trying to rebel against this structure, against this control. She's trying to rebel against the actual emperor of this ship. So it very much relates to that. She is not the emperor. She's trying to compete with the emperor. She's trying to bring him down. And it makes for a very, very interesting novel. I'm not really a sci-fi person, but I thought this was so interesting. And I don't know, just the way this author writes. First of all, they're an amazing author. The explorations of race, of gender, of power dynamics is really great. It wasn't the perfect novel. This is their debut, so there were a little bit of pacing problems for me, but I really enjoyed this, and I feel like it's such a good example of, again, trying to rebel against the emperor and trying to relinquish this control that has been set over this part of society. In kind of the same vein, we have Fina by Nino Cipri. This is a very much shorter novella. It's also sci-fi, and this is about our main characters who have been in a relationship together. They work together. I do not remember their names. Ava and Jules. So Ava and Jules have just recently broken up, and they are still working together in this like kind of IKEA style store. And basically there is a wormhole that opens up, and one of the customers disappears through it. And so they are tasked with going into the wormhole and trying to find this customer so they can bring them back, no matter how dangerous this assignment is. Obviously, it's a very dangerous assignment, but they have to do it for the corporation, for the, you know, for the capital. So it really is just a reflection on the absurdity of capitalism, and I thought it was so much fun. I got a lot more out of it than I thought that I would. I thought it would be just kind of like a funny story, but I was actually really rooting for their relationship. There were a lot of great reflections in this book that I wasn't expecting, and I got a lot more of it out of it than I thought that I would. And again, it's also about trying to rebel against this authority that is telling you and controlling you. And yeah, it's about trying to change that. My other recommendation is another novella called Small Things Like This by Claire Keegan. This is set in Ireland during the time of the Magdalen laundries, and it's about our main character, who is a lumber, who discovers what horrific things hide in this Magdalen laundries. But when they try to fight against it, they are told to be quiet and stay put, because the nuns of these organizations have a lot of power in the small villages, and it's about this character's inner battle of trying to protect their family and their future and their daughter's future, or trying to protect other people's daughters who are stuck in the Magdalen laundries. It's haunting, it's beautiful, it's based on a horrific true story, and it might not be very obvious that this is a fight against the emperor, but the more that you read it, the more you realize that it really is. And finally, if you decided on card number 5, that is the Death card. I love the Death card. I feel like this is such a misinterpreted card. This is a beautiful card of endings, but especially of new beginnings, of rising again, of changing and ending a cycle, of transition, of moving on and rebuilding yourself. And I absolutely love this card, and I am like really manifesting this energy for what I'm going through. So I love this card so much, so I'm really glad that you chose it. And for this, I have to start with, obviously, The Transition Baby, the book about transition. Obviously not the only book, but a book that I really enjoyed. This is by Tori Peters, and this is about a character whose relationship ends because the partner wants to detransition. And it really is just an absurd, sometimes, reflection on sexuality, on motherhood as well, very sad, but on motherhood and of just yourself. And obviously with the card about transition, endings, beginnings, I had to talk about this book. When I say absurd, I mean sometimes the conversations that happen because they feel a little bit out of pocket sometimes. But I really enjoyed the characters. They felt very real. The story itself was, again, it was so messy, but it was so profound in some other ways. I know a lot of people don't like this book, but it really took me by surprise in a good way. It's one of my favorite books of the year. It's not the most amazing book, but I can't explain. There's something about this that really got to me. And this had to represent the death card because, again, transitioning, new beginnings, or in this case, detransitioning, and having a new beginning. Then I also want to talk about a book that I didn't particularly enjoy, but I feel like I just need to mention, and that is Chlorine by Jade Song. This is a horror book that came out last year, and this is about our main character, Ren, who wants to become a mermaid, who wants to transition and become something else other than a human girl. And I didn't really like this book, but a lot of people do. That's why I'm recommending this, because it really does feel like the death card in a lot of ways. There is, in also really silly ways, right? It's because this is a horror book, so it's not very realistic in that sense, but there's a lot of real feeling involved with it, and it really is about trying to leave your old skin behind and starting fresh and starting new. So again, though I didn't like it, I feel like a lot of people do, and you might as well, so who knows. And finally, my final book recommendation for all of these cards, but specifically the death card, is obviously The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I could have put this in The Emperor, but I do feel like, again, Ren in this book, I mean, as we know, there's a lot of endings, a lot of beginnings, a lot of transitions, a lot of power involved in those transitions. And I feel like it really was a death card because, as it says here, she is a dark-skinned peasant girl from the south, and that is not an easy thing at this academy and at this school. So she is leaving who she was behind, this identity of this small peasant girl, and stepping into something so much greater. There's a lot of like fate involved, a lot of like destiny, and she's stepping into something that is so much bigger than what she has left behind. So it does feel like a transition in that sense. It does feel like she's moving on from something and starting and building something new. If that new thing is good, we'll just have to see. But she really is leaving an old identity behind to build a new one, and I think that's why I really think of the death card when I think of the Poppy War, more so than when I think of the Emperor card, honestly. Okay, so there we have it. These are all of my book recommendations for the tarot cards that you have picked out. I enjoy doing book recommendations, but I always feel like I haven't read enough books. That's why they're so spaced out, and I love having something interesting to recommend books to, like a prompt. I don't like to just do a list of book recommendations, so I really like this format of having Fate decide what kind of books I have to recommend, and I hope that you enjoy this type of format as well. Let me know which card you picked down below, and if you have read or if you're interested in any of these books that I have mentioned. And again, if you did enjoy watching this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for bookish content, and I'll see you in my next video. Let me know if you want me to do more of these, okay? I hope that you have a nice day, and always remember that life is worth reading.